cultural appropriation.
Cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
Fuck cultural appropriation. That's my first thing to say. Okay, have you ever dealt with cultural appropriation?
Well, I feel like everyone has. It's just like what you see represented anywhere, or like what people think of your culture, even though it's not your culture. So me personally,
specifically of your culture, like what have you seen?
Yeah, so I'm Jewish, so like lots of people have certain things in their minds about Jews and like how they dress. I've seen people dress up like Jewish religious men, like with wearing hats and little side curls and long black coats, and they don't know what those things represent. They don't know what they mean.
Yeah, you may have noticed I'm white. Yes. But my sister is half native, and so I am extremely protective over native cultures. Specifically, she's half Pima, and so she'll deal with a lot of stereotypes, but not as much cultural appropriation. But native cultures in general, with headdresses, oh my god, white girls love to wear headdresses and dance around in headdresses, especially naked. Or like at least topless, or like they must not be fully clothed when wearing a headdress. It's like a secret rule that the white girls have. If you're going to appropriate a headdress, you got to be half naked doing it, so that you're not only appropriating but also contributing to the hypersexualization of Indian women. So that's awesome. You're totally helping them out and appreciating their culture.
So don't run around naked in headdresses, people. Not cool.
Seriously! Do you have any idea what... The rape rate for Native women on reservations is insanely high because there's very little accountability of people out of reservations coming to reservations and screwing shit up. So, you are directly contributing that when you parade around naked in a headdress. Don't do it! It's not cool!
No.
But twerking. Jesus. White women have no idea what twerking even is.
I never knew what twerking was until she told me.
So twerking is steeped in black culture, and it is created under black culture. It was created with roots back to fertility dances in African traditional dances. And so when you are taking that and stripping it of all the meaning, you are getting praise for something that black women specifically have been completely demonized for doing. Every time that black women twerk, they are seen as trash, not worth anything, but then Miley Cyrus twerks, and she's the queen of ratchet and is amazing. And other cultures deal with it too, a lot. Latinx cultures have stuff appropriated a ton, like the sugar skulls for Day of the Dead, sombreros, all that stuff. It also happens a lot with Desi women, with bindis. Holy crap. White women love to sexualize the bindi, and sexualize the burqa.
Which is strange.
They like to sexualize the burqa.
Especially since the burqa is about not sexualizing.
It's about, like, they think they're liberating Muslim women by, like, taking the burqa and sexualizing it and being like, the burqa is oppressive. You're not helping in any way. All you're doing is taking something that is sacred to them and desecrating it, and it's not cool. So general rule of cultural appropriation, if you want to take something from a culture, there are a few questions you need to ask first. First is this restricted within the culture? If it's something that the general public within the culture can wear, you may be okay. There's some other questions you need to ask, but even if it is, you need to get it from genuine sources. If you want to get some turquoise earrings to cosplay a native character, for instance, you need to get it from a native artist, particularly one within the nation that you are trying to represent, preferably. But definitely from a native artist. If you're getting it from a white person, then you're definitely appropriating. Second is, are the people who wear this, who are actually a part of the culture, able to wear it without ridicule? And if not, then you need to stop. You cannot wear it. You are just waving your privilege in front of them and taunting them if you do. So, representation.
Yeah, minorities lots of times don't get represented enough, and when they do, they're being represented in a really bad way.
The token minority. Yeah. You gotta love the token minority, where they throw one in there.
Person in there.
They throw one person of color, generally a person of color who is nondescript to any culture, so that they can kind of lash it onto any culture that claims to not be represented. The entire idea of representation, the way that producers are thinking about it, is purely in terms of profit, and they're assuming that people will not be able to connect to a person of color as a main character, which is awful in so many ways. A, it shows that they don't care about people of color as their target audience, because a person of color would obviously be able to connect to a fellow person of color, especially if it was from the same culture. So it's very clear who they're thinking as audience.
Yep.
They're not thinking general audience, they're thinking white audience.
Yep. Well, everyone knows that audience is only straight white people, so yeah.
Yeah, they're the only ones that watch anything. Holy shit.
And I mean, like, in advertising, always, there, like, I never even focused on this much until I heard that Cheerios made a commercial with a biracial couple.
Oh my God.
And yes, and there was negative backlash for that, and people were getting mad because there was a biracial couple in an ad. And
they were told that they were promoting interracial relationships, which assumes A, that interracial relationships is something that should not be promoted, something that should be discouraged, I guess. Yeah. And B, assumes that the moment you represent someone, you have an agenda. unless that person is white. When you're representing white people, you're fine, but when you're representing people of color, then you have a hidden agenda. You're trying to incite something. Yeah, and representation is so important. When people of color are looking at the TV and not seeing any of people like them, they get the message that they're not wanted, which is really the message that is getting put forth. Because like these shows are written by people who are fantasizing. They're writing fantasies, they're writing idealized versions of life. And so when that idealized version of life doesn't include any people of color, you don't think people of color notice that, and notice that in your mind, they don't exist. Also going in with representation is whitewashing. So whitewashing is when they take a character that is written as a person of color, and then cast a white person instead. Because it's not like that was an integral part of their character or anything.
Yeah.
The most recent example of this is Tonto in The Lone Ranger, and I'm not even going to start touching it because then I'll be ranting for the next 30 minutes. I'm really pissed about it. Whitewashing is far too common, and it's always excused. People always find ways of excusing it, that like, oh, they're not racist? This is what they're thinking. They're just changing this because this. So yeah, Hollywood, we would really like you to stop pouring bleach on people of color characters.
Yeah.
Stop. Stereotypes. Oh how white people love to homogenize people of color. They get off on it. Really. It's like, it's a hobby to them, to homogenize people of color and be like, hey, all these people, they're all the same.
Yeah, I mean, and stereotypes come into a lot of things, in the way people address people, in the expectations people have of other people, like in going up to a black friend and expecting them to be great at sports, or like...
Or asking to touch their hair. Especially black women. So, stereotypes have a lot of really harmful effects. And there's a ton of stereotypes, because racism is a very complicated issue. There's a ton of different racism. Yeah. They all experience racism in a different way. The criminalization of black people and Latinx is really harmful. It's what leads to the incredibly high incarceration rates. There's also a lot of other stereotypes that go into play that are, on first glance, not as bad as the criminalization, but have harmful effects just the same. For instance, Asian people are seen as the model minority in general until they do better than white people, and suddenly they're the yellow menace. And Muslim women are oppressed. Islam is the root of terrorism as we know it.
Just because someone looks different than you doesn't mean they're oppressed. That could just mean they have a different way of dress.
Seriously,
and you are not obligated to save them.
Muslim women who are wearing hijabs, wearing burqas, they do not need your help to liberate them. And Arabs are not terrorists. Seriously. This leads to some really hostile environments that Arab people have to deal with. Mm-hmm. They deal with a lot of stuff in the airport, especially with the blacklisting system. Blacklisting is horribly designed. They don't do it by fingerprint or anything like that. They only do it by name. So if you happen to have the same name as someone who is blacklisted, then you're pretty much not going to be able to go anywhere because you're always going to get pulled over. Yeah, so there's a ton of different stereotypes. There's no way we can cover them all, but basically, if there's any stereotype that you're thinking of that is a racial minority, just don't perpetuate it. Yeah, that's all we can think of. And actually, it's not enough just to not perpetuate it. You need to actively fight against it, especially if you are a white ally. You need to prove yourself to people of color. They are under no obligation to give you cookies for talking about how you're not racist because you totally did this one thing that totally proved you were a good person. You need to constantly be fighting white supremacy and showing that you are in fact there for them and apologizing when you fuck up, because you will fuck up.
Call people out when they're being racist. It's okay to do that.
If you are white, you have no reason not to be calling out your friends when they're being racist. Like, you have an incredible amount of privilege. You need to use that privilege for good. So, an integral part of a woman in general is her sexuality, and women of color have their sexuality really stripped from themselves. It's not their sexuality, it's really society's to define. And they define it in multiple ways. So, black women are animalistic. They are aggressive, they're lascivious, they're seductive, but they're primarily animalistic. They are always put in animal prints and ads. Yeah. And then Asian women are docile. They're little flowers that have to be taken care of, and that are always crying and falling for white men. And it's basically how Asian women are viewed. They're viewed as a docile person who is always falling in love and being abandoned.
Getting their heart broken. And Asian women are lots of times drawn in like little Japanese schoolgirl outfits and stuff like that. And that's just
the infantilization of Asian women is something that is incredibly pervasive and incredibly harmful. It just do it. And Latinas are spicy. They're muy caliente. They're super spicy. They have an uncontrollable sexuality. They cannot turn it off. It's always out there. It's always looking for a man. And that's not a good attitude to have towards a woman, given that rape is going to be the number one crime.
Abuse. That shows that, like, oh, consent doesn't matter. Of course she wants it.
Yeah, the characterization of women of color's sexuality in general just lends itself to rape culture. Latina woman being always on and always sexual, rape culture. Black woman being animalistic and, again, always sexual, rape culture. Asian woman being always docile and submissive and always wanting to submit, rape culture. It's just a long history of women of color being simultaneously hypersexualized and desexualized. Their sexuality is not theirs in any way. It's completely owned by society. So, movements. Obviously, racism is experienced in different ways by different races, and so there's a lot of different anti-racism movements. There's no, like, one movement. So it's kind of hard to look at problematic elements of a movement that is not homogenous in any way. But generally, the problematic elements that are going to show up are when movements ignore women of color and queer people of color. Those are going to be the most common ones. So that's not in any way to say that black men are more misogynistic than white men or anything like that, which is something that is said a lot. We don't want to contribute to that in any way. So ignoring women of color is just something that happens a lot in society in general. You have to consciously fight against society's messages in order to really get women of color to come into your mind without consciously bringing them into your mind. So yeah, those are going to be the problematic elements that are going to show up a lot, is ignoring women of color and ignoring queer people of color. And time for the positive corner.
Yay, positive corner.
So the positive corner, we got a lot of things happening lately in the positive corner. So with racism specifically, we got 2 organizations that I want to highlight that recently got funding to go and get programs out there, and that is Black Girl Code and Alternative Education. So Black Girl Code is an organization dedicated to bringing black girls into coding and programming and computer science.
I never knew about this one. It sounds really, really cool.
Yeah, it's a great way of really supporting black women and giving them an opportunity that they would otherwise be denied. And the second one is Alternative Education, which my sister is actually working for right now. Hi, sis. So they just got funding to go, and it's an organization specifically determined to bring a better education to Native people, Native American people on reservations. The education is lax in many ways, and so really fighting for Native education. So those are 2 awesome organizations that I really want to highlight. Links about them below, obviously.
Are there resources also below?
Yes, resources. We have a lot of resources for you. We try to get some more videos, some more entertaining stuff.
And hey,
not
guys,
really entertaining,
if you guys have anything that you might think of that you think would make these videos better, more educational, more engaging, then comment, tell us.
Yeah, let us know what you think. We've been not getting comments, and we really want to know what we're sparking.
Yeah,
and
give us
we
feedback.
are going to be responding, we promise. Alright, that's it for today.
See you next week.